If I were to tell you that one of the most emotional game releases this year would be a game about an oil rig crew being infected by a Lovecraftian creature from the deep, you probably wouldn't believe me. That is, unless you've played Still Wakes the Deep. And it really comes down to a phenomenal crew. And I want to talk about them and what makes them, in my opinion, the perfect cast of characters. First of all, I think we can all agree that these characters felt real. The dialogue was 100% authentic, judging by what I've seen from other Scottish people online.
You alright, Roy?
Cars me old mucker. I do.
But even without their endorsement, it all felt like real people having real conversations. I love the fact that we had the subtitles and that the characters themselves didn't have to step outside of how they would naturally speak in conversation. I mean, I know I use different words when I'm speaking to a southerner in the United States. They're just words and phrases that are commonplace from where I'm from that don't always generalize outside of the area. Plus, in Kaz cursing every time that he died or when he saw another person turned into the thing would totally be something I'd do in that situation. There is a certain humanity that it builds into the characters, and you feel more connected with the group when they don't feel as though they're just flowing through a dialogue tree. Speaking of which, I don't think I even realized it when playing because it all felt so natural, but I didn't feel the need for a dialogue tree. Usually I'm the type of gamer that likes to choose my response, and I'll play through a game several times just to hear everything a character has to say and to hear everything that the NPCs have to say in return. But these conversations flowed so much better without that unnatural pausing and dead-eyed stare that NPCs give you while they're waiting for you to select your option. And while maybe it would have been nice to have some agency in what was said, I really feel like everything that Cass had to say perfectly matched with what I would have said anyhow. Now, for me, what I love most about this group is that the characters really felt like a team. Even though we follow Cass and he's doing a hell of a lot of work alone to try and keep the rig afloat, you never feel like he's alone. You know that just as hard as he's working to have the whole crew survive, others are out there doing the same. You really feel it even in the phone calls when they're calling whoever will answer just to alert them to troubles going on elsewhere. It's easy for NPCs to become annoying when they're constantly telling you to do this and do that, and they're sitting around and waiting for things to get done. But even when Brody or Finley tells you to go light the flare stack or go start the generator, it's not because they're waiting around doing nothing. They have a job to do too. When Cass has to travel from leg A to leg B, whenever he feels a rumble in the rig, he comments that Brody must have done his part because Brody's out there dodging death too.
Straight. He must have done like see.
And these guys weren't on some heroic mission. They weren't special ops or exploring some abandoned building. They were at work. Just regular men and women doing their jobs, talking about the latest boxing matches and missing their families over the holiday. They were dealing with their own personal issues, such as Cass trying so hard not to be arrested and leave his family, or them trying not to upset the boss, who was clearly always upset about something. Which is why I loved so much how they all looked out for one another during this whole crisis. They grouped up when they could, they always checked in to alert others when things were going wrong in other parts of the rig, and they weren't trained to do that. They just naturally had a no man left behind mentality. Well, except for Rennick. They were working on a rig that was in shambles for a company that really didn't even care about them, and that helped them bond as a unit. Even without the thing, they could have easily found themselves fighting to stay afloat if a bad storm blew through. That rig had a ton of issues. You know, otherworldly creature aside, I think we can all imagine a scenario where a crisis just happens and we have to fight for our lives with whoever is standing to the left and the right of us. And that hits home in a pretty real way. One thing I really loved is how much Cass felt for these guys. He expressed so much sadness for them, even when they were trying to kill him. They weren't just some random bodies strewn about or some alien life form. They were people, and they were friends. He even stayed on the phone with more than one of them while they died so that they wouldn't be all alone. That couldn't have been easy. He'd been working with his crew for about 4 months or so at the start of the game, so he'd gotten to know each and every one of them pretty well. And even after shit hit the fan, and after all of the running and swimming and hiding and fighting and stumbling across pulsating mashes of bodies, you never forgot that they were people. And he never wanted to hurt them. He felt bad for them, even a dare. He knew, even in all of the chaos of the moment, that there were still people in there. You know, Adair, despite his involvement with the National Front, the British far-right political party, still managed to garner sympathy from Trotz, who was a member of the Scottish National Party, which is a social democratic party. Trotz's commissary note to Adair, where he added, "Sorry to hear about your wee lad," shows continued respect for his fellow co-worker despite their political differences.
Oh, bless his little communist socks.
And Finley had a son that she loved so dearly. Roy had a strong bond with Cass's wife Suze, and Suze loved her family fiercely despite the troubles they were going through. And let's talk about Suze right quick. I friggin' loved her character. A woman who wasn't afraid to call her husband out on his BS and let him know exactly how wrong she thought he was for letting his anger get the better of him.
Christ, but you're a right pair. 2 bars and a ball bag.
But also, she still had a lot of forgiveness in her heart. We get to see and hear snippets of their past, and they had a strong relationship.
I wish I could see you. You're beautiful like this.
Aye? Well.
I mean, according to Roy, Cass did not have the best reputation, and Sue said her parents didn't want her to marry him, but she saw the good in him anyway.
Remember, Jesus loves you, girls. Everyone else thinks you're a gold.
Right, pal.
The love between the two of them felt pure, and even though things had been pretty strained between the two of them before he left for the oil rig, in the end, she still wanted to work things out. It made that moment at the end so much more powerful, knowing that he was able to accept responsibility and make amends for his actions, but she will never know the sacrifice that he made for her and their family. It was also bittersweet because, all things considered, he was a good guy. Even though we have only brief interactions with these characters, we root for them, and it's heartbreaking when they're infected by whatever they dug into out there. Well, maybe except for Rennick. I remember when I played through this game the first time and I heard O'Connor calling out for his wife Mary, my heart broke.
Connor. Is that you? Go away!
I think it was the combination of him appearing mostly human with the deepest, most painful sobbing of anyone in the game that just broke me. I teared up, especially when he told Cass to go away and to go get married because she was his only comfort. And knowing that he'd never see her again, whew, that was rough to watch. Also, Roper, man, he was all jacked up by the time we got to him, but his mind still felt human. He wasn't a threat. He wasn't running around on the hunt like others, but it just felt so tragic to see him there. I've played this game twice so far, and I remember the name of every single character on this rig. I don't think I've ever played a game where I actually remember the names of the characters so easily, but they all felt so important. Brody, right from the start, played the role of keeping his fellow crewmen calm and safe. Even with Wrath, who was hella nervous about his first dive, had Brody there by his side the whole way. Brody remained practical and pragmatic, even when everything fell apart. His main focus was to keep the rig afloat and functional. Finley remained the voice of reason. She was understandably freaked out by everything that was going on, but she kept Cass and everyone focused on the task at hand, warning Cass to stay away from Gibbo and keeping him focused on the pontoons and not overly focused on Roper. And ultimately, she's the one who insisted that everything needed to be destroyed, even if others thought that was pretty extreme. Heck, even Rennick, who was an absolute crap boss, was sadly also quite human. We know there are a lot of horrible bosses like him out there. You know, he was more upset with the police coming because he was afraid that an investigation into Cass would have shined light on his shady operation. He was trying to save his own skin. And instead of listening to Roper, who wanted to take more precautions, he told them to drill anyway because profits trumped safety. Sure, he didn't know about the creature, but there could have been anything down there and he didn't care enough to check it out. There have been so many real-life companies like Cadal who cut corners and put the people at risk in the name of the bottom line. Sadly, the employees happen to be the ones to suffer in a disaster. Now that's the true horror. Then we have Roy, who was too ill to do much to help the team move forward, but he really helped Cass move forward. Oftentimes, these games have someone's wife or child or sibling as the motivating factor for going back into the danger, and yes, Cass's family was definitely motivation, but seeing his love for Roy and Roy's love for him made sense that he would go out of his way more than once to make sure they both made it home. And Roy, despite being weighed down by his worsening diabetes, didn't want to be dead weight. I mean, he made it all the way to the end of the game by making it onto the roof so that Kaz wouldn't have to come back and save him. That took a lot of determination. I also love how he absolved Kaz from guilt by asking him to come back, but telling him that he didn't have to. Ennis did the same thing. He told Kaz not to be a hero if things went south, but that made it even more of a gut punch when Ennis waited for Kaz, but he's the one that Muir snatched away. Ugh, and poor Muir, yelling that he didn't want to be alone and snatching up crewmen left and right just to be there with him. Made me wonder, was it Muir who didn't want to be alone, or was it the creature talking through him? The Chinese Room has a knack for creating games that have characters that you really feel connected to, and it's so impressive that in the brief moments that we got to spend with the crew of the Bear D, that we genuinely cared about them. One of my favorite games by the Chinese Room is Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, and you don't even see the characters in that game, you just hear them through their memories, but you still get a sense of who these people were and the life that they lived. And they brought that same sort of connection to Still Wakes the Deep. The fact that I've seen so many players talk about how emotional they felt at the end of the game speaks to how well these characters are written. That's why I just enjoyed this crew so much. They really added a lot of depth and complexity to a game that could have been pretty one note. And by the way, if you do enjoy complex characters, I have a character analysis of Edie Finch in What Remains of Edith Finch, exploring how her life and how her actions played out in the fates of her family. You should check that one out too. And with that, thank you all for watching. I'm Journey, and I'll see you in the next one.